Computer. Okay, so next week. Oh, well, welcome. Faith and Calm. This is issue session number 110, and it's the week before Shavous, which means Shavous is coming next week. Actually comes Saturday night starts, and it's going to be Sunday and Monday. So it's not going to get out until very late on Monday, and so I don't think that doesn't seem that we can have a 7 o'clock class. We're not going to be able to have so be sure, so we're not going to be able to do the class next week. So there's your warning. We'll have to resume a week after that, and we'll tell you how things are going to go the rest of the summer. Okay, but at that time. So anyway, so I wanted to do a little preparations for Shavous. I know that last year's I gave a long class, many classes in sequence on King David, on King David's great-grandmother, Ruth. And it was a fascinating class series, but I'm not going to do it over again because maybe people remember it. I have to go over it because I just love listening to that whole story every year. And I recommend people to maybe go back to classes a year ago and listen to that because it's just a fascinating love story and gets you into the mood of Shavous and our remarriage to ourselves and to God and to Torah and that which happens on Shavous. So, but a little different subject, something else touch on Shavous, on the subject of Shavous, and that has to do with the 10 Commandments. It's a big thing to everybody to go to the synagogue and to listen to the 10 Commandments, men, women, children, even little babies to go. And the question is maybe why that more than everything else? It sounds okay, but there must be some special connection to that. And the other thing is, the very first of the 10 Commandments, the Rebbe points out in a mimer, it says, what is the first commandment? It says, I am the Lord your God that took you out of the land of Egypt. And that's the first commandment. Interesting enough, the Christians also have a list of 10 commandments. They don't list that as the first commandment because they don't understand where's the commandments. It doesn't say not to kill, it doesn't say not to steal. So they do double up and they make coveting twice, but they don't have this as the first commandment is the belief, basic understanding, the belief in God. They don't have that. They have don't do idols, don't do this, or don't do that. But it is the first commandment. And therefore it contains within it the seeds of all the other commandments. And the language is strange. It says, I am the Lord the God who took you out of the land of Egypt. Why is that strange? I mean, maybe you should say something bigger and more impressive. I am the Lord your God. I created this whole world. That you should know who I am. You should know that I am the Lord your God who took you out, who created the heavens and the earth. So why is this the first of the 10 Commandments? More fireworks. Actually, that's not a stupid question. It's a great question. I don't know if anybody has read the great philosophical work called the Kuzari. It was written in the 1200s by Rabbi Yosef. It was a discussion between a rabbi and the king of the Khazars. Where the Khazars, they lived just east of Ukraine. And it was a non-Jewish country. And the king wanted to decide what religion he should have for his people. So he brought in it sounds like a joke, a Muslim imam, he brought in a priest, and he brought in a rabbi. And true story, because the country of Khazars actually, they converted all to Judaism. And what was the story? He asked this exact question. He said, I don't understand. He says, tell me something why I should believe in your religion. So the priest is talking about God as the creator of the universe, and the Muslim is talking about God as creator of the universe, and the rabbi is saying, yeah, the first commandment is, I am the Lord your God that took you out of Egypt. And he says, doesn't sound so impressive to me. Maybe you should relate it to everything. What does it have to do? And he said, this was a good question. So and the answer was, of course, good enough for the king of the Khazars, and he converted his whole country until the Ukrainians and the Cossacks and the Russians took it over and destroyed everybody. But that's what happens in that section of the world, So, ow! So nothing changes.
I think my aunt had that book years ago, and I remember reading some of it, but I just don't remember much about it.
Okay, so let's get back to the question. Let's keep the focus then, because I don't lose anybody here. So the question starts out, but we're not going to end there. But the question is, what's so great about coming out of the land of Egypt? There's a connection. There's a connection. God created the world in 10 statements, and God gave over the 10 commandments. In Hebrew, it sounds even more connected. It says one is called the Seres Mamaros Nivra Olam. With 10 statements, God created the world. When it says in Baseres Dibros, he gave us at Har Sinai, the 10 commandments, statements actually, it says, he created he gave it at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai. What happened when God created the world is, basically, he created it something from nothing. And that means that he's constantly, as I've said before in other classes, constantly recreating it. It doesn't go on by itself. When you create something from nothing, it will immediately return back to nothingness because that's its natural state, unless there's a force causing it to continue to be a something. Only something that already existed can then change the form to a something else. But in order for something to come from nothing, then it will immediately go back to the nothingness. Why? Because, like I said before, if you throw a ball in the air, it's going to keep moving upwards as long as there's a force there. Otherwise, it'll go back to its natural state, which is back down on the ground. The natural state of the universe is nothingness. And therefore, if there's not a force that's constantly causing it to come into being, it will stop being. If something already exists, like there's a lump of clay, you can change it from one form to another, but that's not creating something from nothing. That's just changing one form to another. When you actually create something from nothing, then you have to constantly bring it in. So that's what happened when God created the world. Okay, but that first creation was God doing everything. God said, that's not enough. That's not my final plan here. I want humans to be a partner in this. I want humans to be part of this creation. I want human beings to actually help transform the world and to continue the process. So he sent the Jews down into Egypt, which means complete slavery to the materialistic culture of Egypt. And Egypt really mastered the material world, and that was what it was all about, was materialism. And it was slavery. It was slavery. And the God said, I'm giving you the tools here at Har Sinai that finally release yourself from Mitzrayim, which means limitations and boundaries, from being stuck within a finite, fixed, limited world where, basically the best you can do is at the end, you'll end up in the grave. I mean, it just doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't have its ability to transcend itself. It just is things, money runs out, gas runs out, life runs out, and everything eventually wears down. It's a very depressing viewpoint on the universe, is to live purely within a materialistic space. While God says, I'm giving you at Har Sinai, he gave us, hey, I'm giving you tools here. You actually can create and change something, and you can become part of infinity. And what your efforts that you do and the things that you do can actually have a permanent, infinite impact, generations and generations and generations. And that is what the amazing thing that we get at Har Sinai, and that's what we get at Shavous. We get renewed this time of year. At this point in time, we get a new infusion of this energy, which is why we all want to come to the shul on Shavous, because we basically are reliving that experience, and we reconnect to that experience. We re-internalize this ability that we are given on Shavous to be able, God says, here, I'm giving it to you. I'm giving you to be able to get out of all your problems and all your limitations and all your traumas and all your fears and everything else. So, hey, go to Shavous. It's an opportunity to connect to your deeper part of who you are, a deeper level of who you are, a soul level of who you are. And souls are not limited. And souls are not divided, and souls can have unity. And interestingly enough, tonight is Rosh Chodesh Nisan. It's 6 days before Shavous. And in the Torah, it says that on this day, the Jews arrived at Har Sinai, and then they spent 6 days preparing. And on the Shabbos afterwards, they received the Torah. And it says that the Jews, when they came to Har Sinai, they all camped as one in one unit, which is the sign of unity. What is unity? And what does unity have to do with this? Well, because divisions and factionism, fighting and fragmentation and confrontations actually are the most abrasive and difficult thing to deal with in this world. If we all felt like we were all part of one thing and we were all connected with each other and we we're all rooting for each other, it's a lot easier to get over some of the challenges in this world, all of the challenges in the world, because we're all in this together. And it's not just you fighting on your own and I dealing on my own, but we're all together on this and we're all working on this together. So Shavous is also very much a time for that idea of unity, and it's brought down Baal Shem Tov. He was yard site is on Shavous. This idea of Jewish unity. So let me get a little bit more clear on this idea and how it connects to the idea of Shavous. So I was listening to, as you know, I listened to Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, and he has different interviews and talks about it. Someone asked him an interesting question, and he asked him about, this idea of Jewish unity, and he used the story from the Torah, actually from the Shalah, but he explains the story in the Torah. So when Yaakov, our forefather, came to Jerusalem, he was fleeing from his brother. He was headed to Haran to get married. And before he left the land of Israel, he stopped off at Har Moriah, where the temple was built, and he built an altar there. This says an interesting thing about it. He says that he took a bunch of stones and he put them under his head. And in the morning, there was this one stone that he took, and he used that to establish an altar for God. The rabbis said, well, it said it took a bunch of stones and he built an altar, and here it says he had one stone under his head. So they said that the Medrash explains and says what happened that night was that the different stones each started fighting with each other. And they said, I want to be underneath Yaakov's head. I want to be under Yaakov's head. And God did a miracle, and they all congealed into one stone. And that stone today is the stone where the temple was, the altar was placed, the Holy of Holies was placed, which today there's this little building that's a hexagonal building on top with a gold dome. But it's our stone. That's the stone that Yaakov Avinu slept on. That was the stone that became the foundation place of the world. And that is the stone that was in the Holy of Holies where the ark was sitting. The Sfas Emes asks a question. He says, I don't understand. If they were fighting, so each one wanted to be underneath the head of Yaakov, then there was a fight. But does it solve by them all coming together as one? That's like, saying, there's all that came together is one big mattress, but still only one can actually be under his head. The rest, they're not under his head. They're under different parts of his body. So the Rebbe explained, and he said, when you're all united as one, it doesn't really matter anymore, which is very much about Jewish unity. When we feel like we're one, we feel like we're all in this together, and we're all, your success is my success. And there's no fighting anymore. It's all one. It's like a mother or a parent or anyone else. Are you jealous of your children because they're being successful? No, it's part of my family. I'm happy that you're winning. I'm happy that my wife is succeeding. She's different than me. I understand the differences are still there. We don't become one in the sense of we're all thinking exactly the same way, but it's part of me. And when the Jews view everybody as part of each other, then we can have unity together. This situation that we have today, where some people look down on others and some people are judgmental of other people, this is the antithesis of what brings unity. It's also the antithesis of what brings spirituality and integration and warmth and love. Because when you are under stress, when you're under contention, when there's fighting going on, when there's battles between this group and this one says this and this one fights this, and you feel like you're in the Knesset or in the Congress or something, like it's just terrible. I don't know how people get through the day that way. It's just really hard to just, constantly be in this constant battle mode of contention and so forth. you need a vacation. You need to get out. You need to feel like you're one. You need to feel like you're all in the fight together. And this is essentially the preparation for receiving the Torah and for ultimately doing what we have to do. We have to get past this idea that this guy and you are you and he is he and all this judgmentalism that goes along with this whole thing. And what is judgmentalism? Judgmentalism doesn't mean that I think everything you say is perfect and right. But judgmental means I can sit in my chair and look down at somebody else. So if that's what's happening, it's no good. If you can just say, I think I know everything about what's going on inside of you, and it just doesn't work. It's the poison for all kinds of communication, and for families and for husbands and wives on all levels. And of course, as I said, it ultimately leaves, and that's what war's about. It's about this I am right and you are wrong, and then we're never going to give in on our positions and so forth. And it doesn't mean that you just compromise on it. You just have to realize that we're part of the same thing. We're all part of one thing. And, your success is going to be my success too. So this is the preparation. This is the part of the idea. Now, connected with that, I heard an interesting thing. But another problem with this whole idea of what I'm saying about the divisions and the machlokes and so forth is the following. It says some people say, yeah, but if we all are compromising, we're compromising our values. You got to hold strong. You got to be right. These are people. This is the right position, and this is the wrong position. And and bad and negativity you have to get rid of. So in the same talk, I heard it was an interesting point. It was also brought by the Sfas Emet. Was listening to Rabbi Jacobson, and he said the following. He says, he says, you were talking about fear of God. So he says, there are two role models for this. One of them was Noah, and the other one was Avram Avinu. Noah, if you remember, made the ark. Now, he didn't make the ark in one day. Did anybody know how long it took? It took 120 years. Why did it take 120 years? God told him 120 years beforehand, start building the ark. Now, it doesn't actually take 100. It's a big building, but it doesn't necessarily take 120 years. So the rabbis explained, and he says, because for that 120 years, he was explaining to the Jewish people, to the people of that world, saying, you know what, there's going to be a flood, and you better get your act together because it's going to come, and the whole world's going to be wiped out. And did anybody listen to him? Not a single person. He didn't get anybody to join him on this journey by being, by the fire and brimstone and negative approach. Well, as Abraham, he was all love and kindness, and he even brought in these Bedouins into his house, and he treated them nicely. And in the end, over 2/3 of the world population are descended from him. All of the Jews, all of the Arab-speaking world, all of the Eastern China, India, and so forth. It all comes from Avram Avinu. And of course, in the religions too, it's all the forefathers of monotheism. So, it's practically speaking, this idea of acceptance of other people, not necessarily saying I agree with everything you say, but accepting them, loyalty to them, unity with them, and believing in them that they can actually get to themselves. This is actually helps bring the thing, the unity. So I'll finish with a story. It was an interesting story, and you have to tell a story. The story goes as follows. In 1986, the Lubavitcher Rebbe received a letter from a young bacher from a religious family, and he was dealing with a certain sexual problem, and he was very, very disturbed about it. And he wrote into the Rebbe, and you don't get to see what he wrote exactly, but you see what the Rebbe wrote back. And the Rebbe wrote back to him 2 points. One was, this was in 1986, he wrote back and he says, there's this thing called neuroplasticity. And I think that if they investigate this, you'll find that, you know what, you can actually change your, you're not stuck necessarily in a particular way of looking at things, you can grow, you can change, and you can, okay, and in some places psychologists have accepted this, in other places they don't. But there is this idea that, we are not necessarily, no matter what our natural trended traits are, a person can develop a new perspective. That's one thing. But the second part was even more interesting. The Rebbe told him, and he says, you asked me this question, why me? And the answer is, I don't know. I don't know why people go through certain struggles. I don't know. Part of God's plan is, and that's part of we don't understand, is some people have much more difficult lives and a lot more struggles in their lives, and they have to, and it doesn't seem fair at all. But I tell you one thing, and if you think about it, you might find something useful for this. If not, okay. But but this is how the rabbis have expressed the concept, and they have said that there's another way to look at your situation, and that is to realize that sometimes God puts a very special soul with very special powers into a certain place, and that's because they have a unique capability and ability to rise over that particular situation. But they can't get there normally. It doesn't work out that you can actually tap that in unless you do a lot of work on yourself and a lot of struggling and a lot of vulnerability and a lot of inner turmoil and so forth. And then when you work that all through, then you're able to actually illuminate not only for yourself, but a whole group of the world, to bring a whole new way of looking at a situation that nobody else has ever seen before. And that could be possibly one reason why you were given these struggles. Not that you should succumb to them, but rather that you have a unique ability, but it's going to be a difficult path. It's a difficult path, but because you were entrusted with this unique power, you can actually be able to uncover it and to be able to utilize it for the benefit of all of mankind. And Rabbi Weiler said, when I was reading this, I noticed an interesting thing. There are two valid and very reasonable ways people sometimes give advice to other people. How do you help other people? One of them is they say, you know what? You have a problem. You got to man up. You got to work through it. And you got to start doing the right stuff. Be strong, go forward. How, we were taught in previous generations, they didn't get into this, like empathy and sympathy, all this other thing. They said, you know what? You got a problem, just march forward. And then there's the other approach, which has become more popular in our times, which is you have to show a lot of empathy and a lot of warmth, and you have to tell them how terrible it is, and you have to cry with them, and you have to feel for them. And that's true too. And I'm not negating that people need to have that shoulder to cry on, and to sometimes just feel terrible about what's happening with them because it looks pretty bad. It looks pretty bad. The Rebbe was telling it that there is actually a third way, and you may not, and if you can appreciate it, the appreciation is no. Yes, the first two are true, but the third is also true. And that is that, you know what, you have a unique opportunity. It's not going to be easy, but you're going to be able to scale a mountain that nobody else ever was able to do. And when you get through it and you work through your problems, which might be very big and nobody else ever seen this kind of problems before, you actually, though God didn't put you there because you're not able to, it's because you have those inner powers and you're able actually to turn it over and to reveal a new light, to do something. And this is one very powerful way to talk to people and so forth, because crying on their shoulders and feeling bad for them, yes, it makes them feel a lot less alone. But here you're actually telling them, you know what, there's a light, there's an ability to do something in the situation. And you're never completely hopeless and a basket case. And why me and woe is me? And this is one of the big problems in our generation is people think that they have no ability to escape their issues, and they need something from external to come in and help them. And the answer is not necessarily. Sometimes you are actually the one to be able to bring things out. So with that, I think I will turn over the microphone to my wife. I hope that everybody will have an inspiring Shavous, and I hope that a little bit of what I was able to say came out and was useful. And let's all talk about neuroplasticity and epigenetics. We're going to go do some more research into the subject because I'm very fascinated now about it, epigenetics and neuroplasticity. So because, We all have these traumas that we're trying to deal with. Okay, does that help?
Thank you, Yechezkel Shimon, and Yasher Koach.
Yeah.
Have a good Shavous.
Thank you.
Okay,
I'll be right back.
so, hello, everybody. Good to see you. Nice to see you. Okay, does anybody have any questions before I begin?
Hi there. I'm going to mute really quickly because there's a lot of noise around. I just wanted to say that I love that Yeheshkel Shem is talking about the possibilities that come from neuroplasticity and how much agency we have for change. That's really wonderful. I actually wrote a paper on it. So yeah, I think it's really the cutting edge of so many things right now about, and it gives us so much hope for what is possible and what we can take on rather than feeling more victimized, but also that our brains can change, which means we can heal, which I think is really exciting. Oh, and I have a second thing. Well, we can talk about it after the class, but I won't be able to be here on the 13th. So I would love at some point, if you want to let me know what those summer plans are, I'd like to.
No, there's no summer plan. There's no shocking summer plans. We're going to do it every week.
Okay.
It's just that for 3 weeks, we're going to do it from Israel.
Oh, when are you going to be in Israel?
Second half of June and first week of July.
Okay, I will be in Israel from July 7th to the 18th. So
exactly the day we come back July 6th and you leave.
That's correct.
Yeah.
All right.
Wonderful. What will you be doing in Israel, Amy?
Oh, I'm going to be, Scott and I are going with my parents, actually, and they consider this their last trip, and we're going to help them do it. We have a lot of family over there to see, but in addition to that, we'll do whatever they want to do. So we are going for and with them, to be with them and to help them be in Israel another time. Which,
very nice.
Yeah,
that's lovely.
And I'm looking forward to hearing what you're going to be doing in Israel. Shalom Shehudis. So
I'll talk about it as we get closer.
yes, all right.
So anyway, good. So tonight I'm going to talk about a spiritual experience that I just had, and but first I'm going to start out with the 4 things that I say every time I speak here, and that is number 1, we're in a unique time. We are very, 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 very deeply already into the process of the unfolding of the redemption. And I know this not on my own authority. I know it from the Lubavitcher Rebbe who said it. And Lubavitcher Rebbe never said anything that did not come true. He didn't say it. He never made any public pronouncement that I know of that didn't come true. So the second thing is our souls were handpicked to be here at this time. Third, we have all the tools that we need. We have the Torah, which is our guidebook, and we have the mitzvahs, which are our power tools. And number 4, what we're doing tonight actively advances the cause of the redemption. So I'm going to tell you about. We came back recently from Crown Heights. We went there for Lag BaOmer, and I'll tell you, I have Lag BaOmer is, I can't even fathom the depth of it, because I've had among the most amazing experiences of my life on Lag BaOmer, and maybe my soul is particularly tied to Lag BaOmer for some reason. But anyway, this one, this Lag BaOmer was no different. So before I get into, I'll tell you that I was. We always try and go down for Lag BaOmer, and I was asked to speak at a ladies' convention, and here's what I decided to speak about. And it's something we've talked about here. I've said that the Rebbe has said that Mashiach is active in the world. Mashiach is revealed. Mashiach has already been appointed. And so the question is, if Mashiach has already been appointed and Mashiach has already been revealed, what's holding everything up? Why aren't the magnificent things that we know are going to happen with Mashiach, why aren't they happening in a way that's so obvious that everybody sees it? So it's a burning question. And I heard a magnificent, a good answer. And I decided that that's what I was going to speak about. That's what I would speak about in Crown Heights at this ladies' convention. And I'm going to tell you the answer right now. It comes from, I heard it from Rabbi Reuven Wolf, Wolfe. He's from Los Angeles. He has this institute called Mayan. He's a Chabad rabbi. He's an excellent Chabad rabbi. And he heard it from Rabbi Shalom Ber Volpe. Rabbi Shalom Ber Volpe is very into the whole thing about Mashiach, and he's written interesting books about it. And the answer, why, if Mashiach has already been appointed and Mashiach has already been revealed, what is stalling? What is stalling the process? And Rabbi Volpe draws from a story in the life of David HaMelech. This story is dealt with not only in Shmuel Beis, which is a book about the second book of Samuel, which is a book about the life of King David, but it's also, the Gemara also comments on it. And I looked it up in both places because when I say something, I don't like to just hear it from somebody else and then give it over. I like to see it in directly from the source. So I looked at Shmuel Beis, the second book of Samuel, and I looked at the Gemara, and it was the Tractate of Megillah, page 14. And it tells a story, an interesting story from the life of King David. Now, maybe you know and maybe you don't know. King David, while Shaul had Saul, they say Saul in English, why Saul was the first king of Israel. And he did not, the prophet at that time was Samuel. And everybody has to listen to the prophet. You have to listen to what God is, the prophet got it straight from God. You got to listen to him. Once he's proven to be a prophet, you have to listen to him. And so the prophet told Shaul, King Saul, to do something. And King Saul did almost everything, but he left out something, a big factor. And when Shmuel found out about it, he was very upset, and he said, "You're going to lose the kingship. That's it. The kingship is going to be taken away from you because you didn't listen to God." And Saul, at that time, he had, before then, he had like, it's called Ruach HaKodesh. He had like an open, he had a deep understanding of godly things, and it was taken away from him as a punishment. And he fell into a melancholy, because you can imagine if you had an open pipeline to heaven, and all of a sudden that pipeline is stuffed up, and you're just normal, like a normal person again. It's got to be an extremely depressing experience. And at this point, King David was Hashem told Shmuel, go to that family of Yishai, one of his sons, is going to be the next king. And I won't tell the story now. I've told it before, but it turns out that Hashem wanted David, this young kid that nobody understood. His family didn't understand him, but he was an amazing person, and he brought all his troubles straight to Hashem. And he grew and grew and grew through years of incredible troubles. If we think we have troubles, it's nothing like the story of King David. And if you want to read the story yourself, buy a copy of the Book of Our Heritage. It's a 3-volume set. Get the one that covers the month of Sivan, because the story of King David is in there. I'm not going to give it over tonight. So anyway, Shmuel anoints David to be the next king. He pours the oil on his head. And at that point, David has, he has an open, he gains an open pipeline to heaven. And you remember the whole story about, the whole thing about, in English, it's called Goliath. In Hebrew, it's called Goliath. So there was a terrible Philistine who was tormenting the Jewish people, and nobody wanted to fight him. And this little David says, "I'll do it." And the story from, I'm sure everybody knows the story. David was successful. And not only that, David goes on to defeat the enemies of the Jewish people. And the Jewish people started saying, now Shaul is still on the throne. And he doesn't know that David has been anointed. But the Jewish people start saying, aha, look at this. Shaul, killed 1,000 enemies of the Jewish people, but David killed 10,000 enemies. And so Shaul, who was already in this kind of funk and melancholy from knowing that his kingship is going to be ended, and from the loss of his open pipeline to Hashem, he starts getting very jealous of David, and he decides to kill him, and he goes after him, and he chases him, here, and he chases him there. Meanwhile, more people find out that David was actually anointed to be the next king, and David has a following. He has like 600 men who are in an army as he's running from Shaul. And they do good things, this army, they do good things. And at one point, he's running away from Shaul, and he's in a place where there's a lot of herds of animals of a very, very rich person, a very, very rich Jew named Naval. And David is king, but he's not on the throne. Shaul is still on the throne. David was anointed, however. And his army is running out of food, and it's going to be Rosh Hashanah soon. So he says to one of the herdsmen, "Go to your owner, Naval, and tell him, my men and I are very, very low on provisions, and we need provisions, especially for Rosh Hashanah." And he's got a lot of people to feed, David. And David says, and you can tell him that, we've been helping you guys a lot. We've been, it's not only just a favor he's going to be doing for us, but we've been doing a favor for him. The herdsman goes, and Naval says something extremely crass. He says insulting things about David, and he says, anointed. Who is this David? And David was the son of somebody named Yishai, and who is the son of Yishai? And he doesn't care about the anointing. And he said, I'm not doing a thing. I'm not going to send him anything. Now, this is sort of like wartime, and when you disobey a king in wartime, it's not the right thing to do. And there's Judaism is not it's a very we don't give people the death penalty very often. It's said that in the time of the Sanhedrin, if they gave the death penalty to somebody once in 70 years, it was called a killer court. And because it didn't happen, not even once in 70 years. But in a time of war, when you disobey the king, it's treason. So David, ordinarily, if you're gonna impose a death penalty on somebody, it has to be done with a court. It has to be done in the daytime and all this kind of stuff. But David decides, no, this guy, he deserves the death penalty. It's happening now, tonight. We're going to go after him. And this guy, Naval's wife, her name is Abigail. And Abigail, one of the herdsmen, another herdsman runs to Abigail and says, King David says that your husband deserves the death penalty, and they're going after him, and because he didn't give them any food, and he was very insolent. And she, a wise woman, she packs up tons of food, puts it on donkeys, sends the donkeys ahead of her, and comes to David herself. And it's fascinating to read it in the Gemara, because she says things in she's an intelligent woman. And she doesn't say, she wants to tell David that he has made a mistake in Jewish law. But she doesn't say, you're wrong, you're not allowed to kill my husband. She doesn't say it like that. She says two things. She doesn't say the word wrong. She doesn't say no. She gives him two facts. She said, because she was, he decided to kill him even that night. And she said, what? Shaul still exists, and your coin has not gone out among the people, meaning there's still a king, there's still somebody on the throne in Jerusalem, not you, and your coin has not gone out among the people, meaning you have not. It's true, you're anointed. It's true, you're the king. It's true, all these things. You were anointed by God through his prophet Samuel. But until you have wide acceptance of the Jewish people, you are, according to Jewish law, you don't have the authority to act as king. You can't do this. You can't pronounce a death penalty on somebody under the authority of being king, because you have not, even though you are anointed, you are God's chosen, yet you have not been widely accepted by the people. And as Rabbi Volpe said, this is an amazing thing. There's an amazing symbiosis between the people and the king. Somebody can be appointed Mashiach, somebody can be revealed as Mashiach, but until he is widely accepted by the people, his hands are tied, and he cannot act. He cannot act with the authority of Melech HaMashiach, King Mashiach. So when the Rebbe said on the 28th of Nisan that I've done everything I can, and it's up to you. It's up to you. The rest is up to you. I can't do anymore. The rest is up to you. He wasn't just saying a feel-good thing so the Jews would say, oh, we're part of this Mashiach process. We're needed. No, he was saying something halachic, something that is critical in Jewish law. Until Mashiach is accepted by the people, he cannot operate. And so, anyway, okay. I just want to add a little addition here about the drama that happened with me this Lag BaOmer. So I decided, that's what I want to talk about in Crown Heights. That's at this convention. That's what I want to say. But I have a problem when I say something. When I say something, I never like to say it on the authority of other people. I like to see it in the text myself. And I've seen in the text not a million times. I've been learning the talks of the Rebbe from the last 11 months that the Rebbe was speaking. It's called Var Malchus. I've been learning it for about a decade. So every year I learn, it's 11 months worth of talks. And every year I go through the series, and in a class that I take. So I've seen each time we get to Parshas Vayigash, I see that the Rebbe says Mashiach has already been revealed. It's amazing. But this thing about Mashiach already being appointed by Hashem, already being appointed, that I never saw. I've heard it. I heard it once, maybe even a decade ago. And I think I asked the person I heard it from, where is it? Where can I find the Rebbe's words that when he says that Mashiach has already been appointed? I want to see it. And I can't remember, it was so long ago, I didn't get an answer. And I don't remember why, but I didn't get an answer. And since then, when I come across big rabbis, there was a very big Chabad rabbi who spoke here in Boston, and he only came once, but I said, I heard that the Rebbe said that Mashiach has already been appointed, but I don't know where. I don't know where it is in the talks in the Rebbe's talks. And he said, I remember the same thing, but I don't know where it is either. So I thought, I'm never gonna find this. So I had already decided I'm going to talk about this, but I would love to be able to find it. Maybe Reuven Wolf, the guy that I heard all this from, maybe he knows where it said, where the Rebbe actually said it, because I don't want to talk about it unless I see it myself. And so I had to search on the drive down. I'm going to give this talk on in Crown Heights, and on the drive down, I felt like an investigative reporter. I tracked down Reuven Wolf. Who's going to have his number? And I finally found his number. I called him. He gave me the source. I was so excited. I went to Crown Heights, and I had to find the book. It wasn't a book that everybody has, and I was staying in a magnificent house in Crown Heights, magnificent house on President Street. The people in Crown Heights are so hospitable. I never met these people before in my life, never saw them before. And yet, it doesn't bother them. They put my husband and I up with a lot of graciousness. And because we couldn't stay at the two places where we usually stay. And they had the most, I should have taken pictures of the house, but I guess it would have been an invasion of privacy. So beautiful. And they had a magnificent library. And I raced to the library and looked all around, couldn't find the book anywhere. Then I went to another friend's house to try and find the book. I was going to speak on Shabbos. And on Erev Shabbos, I went through lightning and pouring rain and thunder to try and find this book at my friend's house. It wasn't there. I came home at Shabbos. I have to speak in a few hours, and I still haven't found it. And everybody had gone to shul. I was alone in this magnificent house, magnificent mansion. And I decided, Hashem, help me. I'm going to go into their library one more time, and I'm going to look for the book. And I went in there, and I looked in the exact same place that I'd looked before. And lo and behold, it was there. It was already Shabbos. I pulled the book down from the shelf, and I knew where to look for it, and I found it. And I have to say that I'll read you the words of the Rebbe right now, because we happen to have the book at home. I didn't know where it was. I would have been able to look it up had I known where it was in the book, but I didn't find that out until the drive down. So the Rebbe says in a talk in Parshas Mishpatim, the Parsha of Mishpatim, in 1991. That's a couple of months before the series of talks that I learned yearly. So that's why I wasn't familiar with it. It was a talk that was given a couple of months before the series that is called Dvar Malchus. And the Rebbe says, Under Minui, it's Yiddish. Okay, be prepared. It's short. Under Minui von David Malka Mashiach, and the appointment of Mashiach. Mashiach is called David Malka Mashiach. Is doch schon gewesen, has nevertheless already happened. Kamasha Kasuv, as it is said, Matzasi David Avdi b'shemen Kadshi Meshachtiv. I have found David, my servant, and anointed him with my holy oil. So the Rebbe said in plain Yiddish, as plain as you can get. Guess what, you guys? The appointment of Melech HaMashiach, it already took place. And is Darf Nar Zain Kabbalas Malchuso Al Yidei Ha'om. The only thing that is left is the receiving of the king, the receiving of the king, the acceptance of the king through the people. Und hiskashus zwischen dem Melech mit dem Am, and the bond, the hiskashus, it's the being tied together between the king and the people. Zwischen dem Melech mit dem Am, B'shlemus Hagilui will then be, after the people accept him, then this bond, we already have a bond with Mashiach. We already have a part of his soul in us, and he has a part of our soul in him. But after we accept him as king, then that bond becomes much more revealed. And we will experience this, we will see it in its full flowering in the true and complete redemption. So seeing those words in black and white, that Mashiach has, guess what, you guys, it's a done deal. It's already happened, that he's already been appointed. And the only thing that is left is our receiving of the king. It was like when I read it, and it was on Shabbos, it was so magnificent. It was like I can't even explain it. A few times in my life, I have felt godliness surrounding me. And I was totally bathed in godliness when I was reading those words. I read them over and over and over again. And everything, every once in a while I would look up from the book and see like the place was so magnificent too. I would look at the floor and I would say, how beautiful. And then I would go back to reading it. And then I would look at a piece of furniture, how gorgeous. And then I would go back to the book. And I don't think it's that I was admiring the physical structure of the floor or the physical structure of that piece of furniture. I think that I was seeing the godliness in everything. I was seeing the godliness in the floor and the godliness in the furniture. Because it was, this is something I chased down for 10 years, a fact I chased down for 10 years. And it's an important fact, something that all of us should take to heart. So what does this all boil down to? It all boils down to that we now know who we are. As I said, the Rebbe told us Chav Ches Nisan. He told us that it's up to us now. The whole thing is in our hands. And The fact of the matter is, though, it's very interesting. God didn't have to make Jewish law like that. He didn't have to make this whole process contingent on the people. But God wanted us not, what is God? God didn't want us just to be bystanders in the most incredible passage in human history. He wanted us to be the main players, and that's who we are. No matter how little we feel we are not. We are the main players in the most incredible facet of human history. So next week, God willing, I have some very nice stories already lined up. And meantime, it's almost 8 o'clock, so I'm going to turn off the recording. And if anybody has any questions, I'd love to hear them.